Welcome to BeerNet Radio. Listen to on every continent except Antarctica. B-E-E-R-R-N-E-T.
Beer.
BeerNet Radio.
Yo, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Good. I was going to close my shades, but I guess I won't.
they're fine. It's not bad.
Okay.
I guess my. Oh yeah, my neon fell off the wall.
Oh, yeah.
It's on the floor. I didn't even notice till I turned the camera on. Oh well. We'll fix it in post.
No, we won't.
Technical difficulties?
Woohoo. Different kind of technical difficulties. Did you watch the Oscars? Oh.
I actually watched a Netflix documentary on Ted Kaczynski on my laptop with headphones on while Millicent watched the Oscars. So I did glance up and see why was Will Smith crying so much. I just saw him and then Millicent went to sleep, so I never got a chance to ask her what was he bawling about.
Because you weren't there. You're serious. Are you serious?
I am serious. Yes.
So Chris Rock made a joke about Jada Pinkett's hair because she shaved her hair because she has alopecia. And at first, Will Smith looked like he kind of chuckled, but then you see Jada Pinkett like make a face like she ate a turd. So then Will Smith goes up on stage and slaps the hell out of Chris Rock and goes and sits back down. And everybody thought like, wait, was that scripted? What? But then I think like in the US, they cut that part, but I think it was like a Japanese version or something circulated that then Will Smith started screaming, keep my wife's name out your effing mouth.
And so didn't she have like an affair with somebody?
Yeah, a long time ago. Yeah.
I guess that doesn't matter, but that is amazing. I totally missed all. I guess I was like, oh, it was so boring. And I was not being funny because I didn't have the sound up. So I guess I did miss out on all the fun.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Chris Rock and Will Smith getting after it. Huh.
After it.
On live ABC network television.
Yeah.
I love it. I love seeing stuff like that. Hi, Bianca. You're on mute and your camera's off. You don't have to have your, well, we would prefer your camera on, but
you don't have to have your camera or your sound on.
Yeah.
Hi,
you don't need your sound or camera on. It's fine. Bianca, my name is Harry Shoemaker. I have Jen Kirk on the line too. We're editors at Beer Business Daily. We have been following your coverage at Courthouse News with bated breath for the last couple of weeks on this Stone Molson Coors case. Fascinating case, Bianca, because we're in the beer industry. It's our life. We've been reporting on it for 20 years. It was a huge surprise within the industry, and you were there for most of the trial. So first, tell us who you are and how you got to Courthouse.
So I have worked for Courthouse News for a little over 6 years. And unlike you folks who are in the beer industry, I guess I could say I'm in the court industry. I'm a journalist focused on covering the court in San Diego pretty much exclusively. And so we had some coverage, a bit of coverage when the case was initially filed in 2018. And it was supposed to go to trial last year, and that kind of got postponed, like everything else during the past couple of years. And then we just wrapped up the 3-week trial.
And of course, the bombshell and the headline from that is that Stone was awarded $56 million in damages because of alleged, confusion between Keystone Light and Stone. They had asked for like $256 million, so they didn't get what they asked for. But from our perspective of the industry, it's like there can't be any. There's just it's just anathema. It's crazy to think that there would be any market confusion between the two, but that maybe it's because we're in the industry and we're in the trees. We don't see the forest. I mean, just from as a layperson, what are your personal thoughts? I mean, are you a beer drinker?
It's funny you say that because I'm a San Diegan. I'm from San Diego, and
Oh,
so
so okay.
I'm familiar with Stone Brewing. I've gone to their restaurants a few times. My dad enjoys Arrogant Bastard Ale. He
Mhm.
mostly
Yeah.
for the name of the beer. But
Yes.
when I told him I was covering the trial, he said the same thing. How could anyone confuse Stone Brewing for Keystone Light? They're two totally different things. And I'm not much of a beer drinker. I'm more partial to cocktails. So I like to think I could be kind of an impartial witness during the
Yeah.
trial because of that. And that was kind of the thing, right? That was what the trial was focused on. I think that's what all the folks in the industry were kind of wondering is how could this jury, come to the conclusion that com- consumers in the marketplace were confused. And there was evidence to show, on both sides that there was confusion or there wasn't confusion, right?
Right.
I do think what some of the stuff that was compelling was when Keystone kind of first introduced its packaging and Stone showed some folks in the industry itself in terms of the distributors for beverages were confused. There were signs, in stock rooms of uh, grocery stores and liquor stores kind of directing not Stone Brewing, Keystone Light, or vice versa. And so I think that was compelling. But there certainly was, evidence on both sides to kind of bolster each other's claims, and then the jury ultimately sided with Stone.
Right. And a lot of people, in the industry are comparing it to like an OJ, how could this have happened? But the point is that what really came out of this that surprised everybody was how much that Stone owed 450 million to
I think it was 464.
that is a half a billion almost is very shocking to anyone. And this almost seemed like a Hail Mary on their part just to try and save the company and keep it intact because they do own their own distribution in Southern California. There's some speculation that distribution company might even be worth in the brewery. They don't want to split that up to raise money, it seems like at this point, although I don't know what's going to happen there. When you were like listening to Jen, go ahead. I know I'm hogging the mic as usual. Sorry, but this will be my last one. But
Okay.
when you were like listening to testimony, did you get a sense of kind of the jury going back and forth? And did you ever get a sense of what their thoughts were, just I guess by looking at them?
Not too much.
Okay. Yeah.
The jury, and I am careful to kind of in terms of demographics of juries, it was a majority a jury filled with women.
Mhm.
Presumably women. I don't know their gender identity, and so I don't want
Sure.
to assume. But I
Right.
believe it was a jury. There were initially 9 jurors, but the one juror dropped off after the first day of trial. So the case was decided by 8 jurors, and 7 of them, I believe, were women.
Mm.
And one was a man. And I didn't include that in my reporting, and I don't know that any others did. And so that was
Mm.
kind of something I kept in mind, and that was intentional on the part of the attorneys when they selected the jury at the beginning. I'm sure they did not want people who drank either Stone or Keystone Light or were intimately familiar with the brands to be on the jury. And so, it was a bit of a tedious trial. It was 3 weeks, which isn't totally unheard of for a civil case. And that's typically my wheelhouse, as I cover mostly civil litigation as opposed to criminal. They get a bit tedious. Some of them looked a bit bored at points. I was a bit bored at points.
Yeah.
Um, I think both sides did a really good job advocating for their clients. I mean, the judge said as much. But in some ways, I think some of the evidence they put on was really beyond kind of a lay person's interest or understanding of the ins and outs of the beer industry. It certainly was beyond my interest or understanding, and I'd imagine it was for the jury too. Particularly, I think both sides put on some expert testimony, and they paid for, I'm sure they spent an exorbitant amount of money, I don't know how much, on these consumer confusion studies, which I didn't even get into my reporting as much because I just didn't find it as compelling or interesting. But both sides did pay for studies of consumers to kind of do like shopping surveys and put things in the market and say, if someone asked you to pick up a Stone IPA from the store, what would you get them? And if, they ended up picking up Keystone Light, then Stone said, see, that shows that they're confused about what exactly Stone Brewing is now that we have this infringing packaging. That to me was a bit beyond maybe what they needed to do to kind of prove their case. But I don't know, maybe the jurors would say otherwise.
Yeah.
So, hey, Bianca, Jenn here. Nice to meet you. And thank you so much for all this extra color. It's fascinating. So, to your point, both sides presenting compelling evidence. It didn't seem like a complete slam dunk for Stone, right? They got 56 million in damages. They had asked for about 4 times more. And after, the news broke on Friday, we got a statement from Molson Coors saying that jurors rejected the assertion that Miller Coors willfully infringed on the trademark. So can you give us a little more detail about that, about, that they didn't willfully infringe? What else was said about that?
I'm not an attorney, so I don't I don't know how much insight I can offer in terms of the legal kind of definitions of willfulness and exactly what a juror has to find in order to find for that. But to your point, in it not being a slam dunk for Stone, I mean, I think the most compelling, at least for me, I found it very compelling evidence that that Miller Coors put on was this this woman who worked for the company and was an archivist, which is really fascinating. And I don't know, you folks in the industry may know more of how usual or unusual that is. But she basically went through all this old school 90s advertising, which really showed, Keystone came out in 1989. I think it showed as soon as 1990, if not 1991, that they were using the word Stone, to Harry's point, in their advertising of Keystone Light. They were referring to it as Stone. They had Party with the Stone merch that was kind of quirky and fun and all these old school graphics. And so they certainly showed that they used the word Stone. I don't think there are any questions about that, but they didn't own the trademark. Stone Brewing did. And both Greg Cook and Steve Wagner, when they testified, kind of said, the history of choosing the name Stone Brewing, why they chose it, going to the library in downtown San Diego to look up trademark archives at the library to see if they could use the mark, applying for it, just a few months after they started brewing in 1996, and then getting a trademark certificate 2 years later in 1998. I mean, they are the ones who owned it. So even if Keystone used it, they didn't own it. They could have. They can't, the beer came out several years before Stone Brewing was even founded. But in terms of like the law, Stone Brewing owns the trademark. And so I kind of think that's really what probably won over the jury, and that's why they won.
Right. They had that piece of paper. And because, Keystone was before Stone. They were in the trade, they were interstate. So that, you would think they'd kind of own the mark, but they never applied for it, which just is just crazy to me, a company that size, because they were calling it, like you said, a box of stones. When they came out with the 15 pack, that was when really Keystone Light took off, and they call it a box of stones. And nobody thought anything of it at the time. And boy, $46 million later, sheesh. Maybe I should sue Molson Coors. What do I have on them? Do I have anything, Jenn? Do I have something?
On individuals, sure. But I have one more follow-up, Bianca. So you covered tons of trials, right? And I assume you've seen other trials like this, right, for infringement. I guess, how does this compare to what you've seen before? I mean, were you surprised by the verdict at all?
I wasn't surprised by it. It actually reminded me a bit a few years back, and I have covered trials. I don't know that I'd characterize it as a ton. Going to trial is fairly unusual, right?
Sure.
Most, I think at least, 90 or 95% of cases, an attorney could tell you how many ends in a settlement or dismissal, right? So really very few cases actually go to trial. I have covered some other trademark kind of intellectual property cases, and the case did remind me a bit of a trial I covered a few years ago, involving another kind of San Diego, household name, and that was Comic-Con. And so San Diego Comic-Con sued Salt Lake Comic-Con for using their trademark, and the people in San Diego won that. And so there were kind of some similarities there, and it reminded me of it a bit. And then what was the sorry, what was the rest of your question? Surprised? I wasn't really surprised. When I was sitting there, I did think that Stone had proven that the trademark had been infringed, but I thought that their monetary ask was a bit steep. I know that folks in the industry seemed really surprised when I reported how much money they owed to their investor. It seems like that was the first time that had been revealed publicly, and folks kind of maybe people who don't like Stone were more inclined to say, oh, they're just going to use this to pay their debts, and then this is kind of their Hail Mary to pay off their investor. But I think
that is definitely a lot of people that we get a lot of emails from people. And that's just been kind of the general consensus, because I like Greg Cook, and but Greg is very he's the beer Jesus, and
he nicknamed himself Beer Jesus.
Well, I mean, nobody's ever going to accuse Greg of not being narcissistic. Hopefully he doesn't sue me for saying, Greg, just kidding, love you. But yeah, I mean, I think he's created some enemies. I think there was a little bit of sanguine. Wow, that was a big number. And Bianca, trust me, nobody knew. At least I didn't know. And that was probably the biggest news out of the trial, other than the verdict itself. So
it almost makes you wonder why Stone would even want to go to trial, knowing that would be disclosed publicly.
Well,
right?
I think it was about to be disclosed anyway, because I think the note's coming true. Yeah, it's coming due, and so
true.
Yeah. So anything else that we haven't that Bianca, we don't want to keep you too long. So anything else that we're missing about this that nobody's asked you yet?
I think, that it's not done, right? And so there's going to be some post-trial filings and motions from both sides. I imagine Miller Coors is going to appeal at some point. They may have to wait out until there are some motions before Judge Benitez, who's the judge who oversaw the trial. But Stone is expected, and I believe they've already indicated that they're going to ask for treble damages, which is basically triple the damages award. So that would get closer to that, $216 million that they had asked for, and half of that money that they owe their investor. And so that's kind of the next thing to watch, is whether Judge Benitez finds that they should get that extra bump in their damages award. And it's basically as a punitive measure, right?
Right. And how long does that normally take? Do you have any idea?
I'd imagine at least 6 months.
Yeah.
And if Miller Coors appeals I don't know how they'd appeal the jury trial, but they may appeal they'd certainly appeal a treble damages award to the Ninth Circuit. And once that happens, I'd imagine it would be about a year before we'd hear oral argument in that. So this is going to be going on for a long time, and I don't think Stone's going to see any money for at least a year.
Right.
Was there
Yeah.
anything said about, I mean, almost obviously they can't use this packaging or campaign anymore, right? So was there anything said about cease and desist, how quickly they have to get that product, or is the product still, I think the product's still in the market, right? Or I forget.
That is, I believe, still being worked out, but I think they were already starting that conversation immediately after the jury trial came to a close Friday afternoon, which is also typical, right? Juries don't want to come back on Mondays.
Right.
So they'll have a verdict, at 3 or 4 p.m. on a Friday, which is what happened here. And so I think immediately after, the attorneys were discussing those motions regarding stopping of the sale of Keystone Light packaging that's found to be infringing. I believe Stone plans to seek disgorgement of the profits they say that Miller Coors has earned the past 4 years since they filed their case against them selling the beer, and Stone estimates that to be over $700 million.
Okay.
And I believe Stone said they'll even seek profits earned from distributors. So there's a lot of tentacles to this issue that are beyond Miller Coors and what's been characterized as the David versus Goliath fight, which I know some in the industry also are beer fans and beer watchers have also taken issue with the way that Stone's characterized it, considering it's filed similar suits against smaller fellow craft brewers, which I did not get into my reporting because that wasn't what was at issue in this trial. And I know some people in comments to me were, or just about some of my reporting were upset by that. But, I was reporting on this specific case and not the kind of galaxy of other cases related to it.
Wow. That's, I'm thinking that, because, I was a little bit surprised that Molson Coors didn't immediately just come out and say, we're going to appeal. They said, maybe that's common. We're going to assess and do with this or that. But 46 million might be cheap. They might just say, hey, we'll give you 46 million right now to settle if you just drop everything. And risk, it's all risk assessments. And because they are a public company and, nobody wants a $700 million possible judgment hanging over them for years, and so I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud. But well, Bianca, thank you so much for being on such short notice, and your reporting was fantastic.
I will say I'll be hosting a Twitter Spaces tomorrow at 11 Pacific time in the morning with the Courthouse News Twitter, and we'll be talking about the trial also.
Oh, okay, we'll tune in for sure.
Awesome.
All right, well, thanks for reporting about beer, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care.